Your hand slips off the jar lid. Again. You brace it against your hip, you grit your teeth, you twist with everything you've got, and the thing still won't open. I used to think that was just getting older. I was wrong. That grip, the one that keeps failing you, is quietly telling you something that most doctors never say out loud. The strength in your hands right now predicts how many years you have left, more accurately than your blood pressure does. I didn't believe it either, not for 1 second, until I read the numbers myself, and then felt it change in my own hands in about 3 weeks. I first noticed this watching an old man in a market, wringing a wet cloth like it was nothing, and it stuck with me for years. Stay with me, because I'm going to show you a Japanese practice that goes back to a nationwide health program from 1928, and a dead simple finale trick from a bucket you already have in your kitchen. And this works in the home you already live in, with the 2 hands you already own. Let me tell you how I fell into this, because I was the last person who should have cared about grip. I'm not an athlete. I never was. I spent most of my life thinking about my hands only when something hurt. Then one afternoon I couldn't twist the cap off a bottle of water, and my grandson opened it for me without even looking up from his phone. That small thing embarrassed me more than I want to admit. So I started digging, the way I do, expecting to find nothing but gym talk and protein powders. Instead, I found a study that stopped me cold. In 2015, a team of researchers published something in a medical journal called the Lancet. This wasn't a small experiment. They followed nearly 140,000 adults across 17 different countries. The lead researcher was a doctor named Daryl Leong out of McMaster University in Hamilton, Canada. And what they found flew in the face of everything I assumed about health. They measured people's grip strength with a simple squeeze device. Not blood tests, not scans, just a squeeze. And they discovered that for every 11 pounds of grip strength a person lost, their risk of dying from any cause over the following years rose by about 16%. Their risk of dying from heart disease rose even more. Here's the part that made me put my coffee down. Grip strength turned out to be a better predictor of death than a person's blood pressure. A squeeze of the hand told the researchers more than the cuff on the arm. Now, be skeptical with me here, because I was. My first thought was, so what? Maybe strong people just happen to be healthy, and the grip is only along for the ride. That's a fair doubt. But the researchers had already thought of that. Even after they accounted for age, for smoking, for exercise, for job, for all of it, the grip still stood on its own as a warning light. It wasn't just a passenger. It was the dashboard. And that changed the question completely. Because if my weak grip was a warning light, then the real question wasn't why is it weak? The real question was, what turned it off? What made my hands quietly lose their strength while I wasn't paying attention? The answer to that made me angry. But to understand it, I had to look at how I actually live. Think about your day. Really think about it. When was the last time your hands had to fight for anything? You push a button and the garage door lifts. You wave your hand and the faucet runs. You buy a jar with a lid engineered to pop open with almost no resistance, and if it doesn't, there's a rubber gripper gadget sold right next to it for a few dollars. Your car door, your can opener, your toothbrush, your screwdriver, every one of them has been softened, padded, motorized, and made effortless. We were told this was progress, and in a way, it was. Nobody misses hauling water from a well. But here's what nobody told me. Your grip is a use it or lose it system, the same as any muscle in your body. For thousands of years, ordinary life kept human hands strong without anyone thinking about it. Wringing laundry by hand, kneading bread, carrying pails, opening things that actually resisted, sweeping, scrubbing, twisting, pulling. Your grandmother never did a single grip exercise in her life, and she probably had a handshake that could crack a walnut. Then, decade by decade, all of that quiet daily resistance got engineered out of our lives. And here's where I started to feel used. Because there's a pattern to it. First, they sell you the machine that does the gripping for you, the electric jar opener, the automatic everything. Then, years later, when your hands have gone soft from never being asked to do anything, they sell you the therapy, the braces, the gadgets, and the supplements to deal with the weakness that the first machines created. You pay twice, once to lose the strength, and again to chase after it. I'm not saying anyone sat in a room and planned that. I'm saying nobody in that whole chain had any reason to tell you the simple truth. That the strength you were losing was free to keep, and it was slipping away a little more with every convenience you welcomed into your home. There's no product to sell in telling you to just use your hands more. But here's what pulled me forward, and it's the reason I kept researching instead of giving up. Somewhere in the world, people never stopped using their hands the old way, and their numbers prove it. That somewhere is Japan. If you look at where people live the longest, the same names come up again and again, and Japan sits near the top of every list. Now, everybody loves to talk about the Japanese diet, the fish, the tea, the small portions. That's real, and it matters. But almost nobody talks about their hands. And once I started looking, I couldn't stop seeing it. In Japan, there's a daily habit built right into the culture that keeps hands working from childhood all the way into old age. It even has a name. In Japanese schools, children clean their own classrooms. It's called o-souji. There are no janitors coming through with machines. The kids get down on their hands and knees with a damp cloth called a zokin, and they push it across the floor, wring it out by hand, and push it again. They wring that cloth dozens of times a day. Wringing a soaked cloth until it's nearly dry is one of the most demanding grip movements there is. Your forearms burn. Your hands have to twist against real resistance, over and over. I tried it. I soaked a hand towel, and I tried to wring it truly dry, the way you'd wring out a mop rag. My hands gave out before the towel did. Water was still dripping out of it, and my forearms were already done. That was the moment it stopped being a study to me and became personal. I was 50-something years old, and I couldn't wring out a towel the way a Japanese 8-year-old does every single afternoon. And this isn't just school children. This kind of active, hands-on daily living runs through Japanese life at every age. Which brings me to the date I promised you. Back in 1928, Japan launched a nationwide daily exercise program broadcast right over the radio. They called it rajio taisō, radio calisthenics. Every morning, all across the country, people would stop and do the same set of simple movements together, guided by a voice on the radio. Factory workers, school children, grandparents in their gardens. It's still going today, nearly 100 years later. Some of those movements deliberately work the hands and wrists, clenching and spreading the fingers, rotating the wrists. Think about what that means. An entire nation, for almost a century, has treated the hands and the body as something you maintain daily, like brushing your teeth. Not a special event, not a gym membership. Just a few minutes every morning keeping the machine oiled. And meanwhile, in my part of the world, we spent that same century inventing ways to never have to move our hands at all. So I understood the why, I understood the history. But understanding doesn't rebuild a single muscle fiber. I still had the hands I had. And that's exactly the wall most people hit, and it's exactly where I almost quit. Because maybe you're thinking what I was thinking. That's fine for kids in Japan or people with time and energy to spare, but I can't rearrange my whole life. I'm not going to start scrubbing floors on my knees. Maybe your knees won't let you. Maybe you live in a small place. Maybe money is tight, and the last thing you want is one more thing to buy. I hear you, because I said all of it. And that moment, standing there with a dripping towel and forearms already burning, is exactly where most people give up guessing and start following a real plan. That's the whole reason I put everything I learned into the Complete Golf Fix system, a collection of digital books that walks you through the fundamentals most people skip, in the right order, so you stop leaking away your strength and your good habits without ever knowing why. The First Fix book alone hands you a 15-second grip audit that changes how you hold things immediately, plus the setup adjustments that finally get taught instead of hidden, and Precision Golf decodes the one tiny grip micro adjustment that unlocks real consistency. You don't have to take my word for any of it. Tonight, grab any jar with a stubborn lid, wrap your whole hand around it, and hold a hard, steady squeeze for a full 3 or 4 seconds before it gives way. Feel how much that one held squeeze wakes up your hand, and you'll understand exactly why the books build the fundamentals the same way. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Your hands are already losing a little strength every ordinary day you don't ask them to work, so the sooner you start, the more you keep. Now let me hand you the part that costs nothing. Needs no equipment, and fits inside the exact life you already have. This is the section I wish someone had handed me 2 years ago. Start with that towel. You already own one. Take any hand towel, soak it under the tap until it's dripping, and then wring it out as hard as you can, twisting your 2 hands in opposite directions like you're wringing a chicken's neck. Forgive the image. Wring it one direction until no more water comes out. Then wring it the other direction. That's it. Do that 3 or 4 times, once a day. You'll feel it the first time in muscles you forgot you had. That single movement hits your grip, your wrists, and your forearms all at once, the same way that Japanese cleaning cloth does. It costs nothing. It takes 90 seconds, and you can do it standing at your kitchen sink. Here's the second one, and this is where the word grip in the title really earns its place. It's not just about squeezing harder, it's about how you hold things in the first place. Most of us, as we get weaker, start cradling things. We hug the grocery bags against our chest. We carry the laundry basket braced on our hip. We're using our arms and our body to spare our hands, and every time we do that, we let the hands get a little weaker still. So flip it. Start carrying things with your hands and fingers on purpose. When you bring in the groceries, load up the bags and let them hang from your fingers, and just stand there and hold them for an extra 10 seconds before you set them down. That's called a farmer's carry, and it's one of the most respected grip builders there is, and you're doing it anyway. You just never lingered in it. Grab a full milk jug in each hand and hold them, arms at your sides, for as long as you comfortably can. Set them down, shake out your hands, do it again. You're using items already sitting in your fridge. Third, and this is the one that surprised me most, stop buying the gadget that opens your jars and start letting the jars fight you again, but smartly. When you meet a stubborn lid, before you reach for a tool, wrap your whole hand around it, press your palm down hard for grip, and give it a slow, steady turn, holding the squeeze for a full 3 or 4 seconds, even if it doesn't open right away. That held squeeze against real resistance is a genuine strength move. The jar is your gym. You are about to throw away the workout and reach for the crutch. None of that requires a purchase. None of it requires a spare room. None of it requires good knees. You can do every bit of it between the sink and the fridge in a home the size of a shoebox. And within a couple of weeks you will feel the difference the next time a lid tries to beat you. Now, I promised you a finale. I promised you something specific. Something that goes beyond a wet towel. Something I found buried in the way physical therapists and old martial arts teachers actually rebuild a ruined hand. And this is the one that took my own grip from embarrassing to something my grandson noticed. It's so cheap and so simple that when I first read about it, I laughed out loud and assumed it couldn't possibly work. It's a bucket of rice. Let me explain, because this is real, and it has a lineage. In traditional martial arts, long before anyone sold rubber grip trainers, students built iron hands by driving their fingers into containers of sand, gravel, or dried beans, over and over, until their hands could grip like a vice. That old practice quietly survived, and it made its way into modern hand rehabilitation. Physical therapists today use rice buckets to bring strength back to hands wrecked by injury, by surgery, by arthritis, because plunging and gripping in the rice works every tiny muscle in the hand and forearm through its full range, and it does it gently, with resistance that gives way instead of jarring the joints. There's nothing to strain, nothing to drop on your foot, nothing that can hurt you. Here's exactly how to do it, and you can set this up this weekend for the price of a bag of rice, which most of you already have in the pantry. Take a bucket, a large pot, or a deep container. Fill it with dry rice, deep enough to bury your hand up to the wrist. Dried beans work just as well if that's what you have. Now plunge your open hand straight down into the rice. Once your hand is buried, close it into a tight fist against the rice, feeling it push back on every finger. Hold that fist for a second, then open your fingers wide, spreading them apart against the weight of the rice. Squeeze, spread, squeeze, spread. Then twist your buried hand back and forth like you're turning a doorknob deep in the rice. Then dig your fingers down and grab a fistful and let it pour out. Do that for maybe 1 minute per hand, once a day. That is it. That is the whole secret. And here is why it beats every gadget in the store. A rubber squeezer only trains you to close your hand, but your hand loses strength in every direction as you age, the closing and the opening and the twisting. The rice pushes back no matter which way you move, so it rebuilds the whole hand, top to bottom, in 1 minute. It's the same movement in essence as that Japanese child wringing a cloth, or a farmer plunging his hands into a seed sack. It's the resistance of ordinary life poured into a bucket sitting on your counter. I ran this for about 3 weeks before I let myself believe it. Then I picked up that same water bottle that had beaten me in front of my grandson, and the cap came off with a quiet crack on the first try, and I just stood there in my kitchen grinning like a fool. A bag of rice. That's what stood between me and the thing I'd been quietly ashamed of. And that's the part I keep coming back to. The knowledge was never lost, not really. The martial artists kept it. The therapists kept it. A whole nation on the other side of the world kept it woven right into their mornings and their schoolrooms. It was only lost to us, the people who were sold convenience by the truckload and never told the price tag written on the back. The price was our own hands. So here's what I want you to carry away, and it isn't a fact, it's a feeling. Somebody decided, without ever asking you, that your hands should be spared every bit of honest effort, and they called it a gift. It was never a gift. It was a slow trade, your strength for their profit, and the receipt shows up years later when you can't open your own front door in the cold. Today you got the strength back on the ledger, and it didn't cost you a thing but a wet towel and a bucket of rice. You're the kind of person who gets suspicious when something that used to be free suddenly needs a monthly subscription and a special tool. That instinct of yours is right, and it's worth more than any gadget on the shelf. Keep it. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this. Go try the towel ring, right now, today, at your own sink, and come back and tell me in the comments how many times you could ring it before your hands quit. Just drop the number. I read them, and I want to see where people are really starting from, because I promise you're not as alone in this as you think. And if you know an old cleaning trick or a hand habit your parents or grandparents did that we've all forgotten, put it down there too. That's how we keep these things alive. If any of this landed, Come along with the rest of us who are done paying twice for what plain common sense used to handle for free. That's really all this is. A bunch of ordinary people digging up what got quietly buried and handing it back to each other. Next time I'm going to show you something even stranger. An old Japanese way of breathing before sleep that came out of that same 1920s health movement, and what it does to how deep you sleep. I tested that one too, and I wasn't ready for what it did. I'll see you there. This video showed you the idea. But the full Japanese grip routine, week by week, step by step, is waiting inside the Practical Wisdom Circle. In there, you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. So many old ways folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime with one click. No risk. Now that you've got this grip down, you might be wondering if it really makes a difference with your driver. The next video shows you some surprising test results that could add real yards. It's starting right here.